It only took 94 seconds. 94 seconds for Senator Dick Durbin to completely dismantle Pam Bondi's carefully constructed facade and expose the FBI director's desperate attempt to save her. What started as routine questioning about Justice Department ethics became the most catastrophic confirmation hearing meltdown in modern Senate history. And when Kash Patel tried to intervene from the gallery, his help would destroy both their careers in ways neither could have imagined. Bondi walked into Senate Judiciary Committee Room 216 that morning, believing her nomination for Attorney General was a foregone conclusion. Behind her sat Kash Patel, the FBI director who had spent weeks preparing her for exactly these kinds of questions. They had rehearsed every potential line of attack, anticipated every Democratic gotcha moment. But there was one subject they thought was buried so deep that no senator would dare to touch it. They were catastrophically wrong. March 28, 2025, 2:17 p.m. The committee room was packed with reporters, cameras, and spectators who had come expecting political theater but would witness something far more devastating. Bondi sat at the witness table, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her expression radiating the confidence of someone who believed she had weathered the worst of the Democratic attacks. For 3 hours, she had deflected questions about her consulting work, her foreign clients, her previous statements about various Trump investigations. Her answers were polished, evasive, and carefully crafted by a team of lawyers and media consultants. Behind her, Patel watched with satisfaction, believing his protege was performing exactly as coached. Then Durbin leaned forward, adjusted his glasses, and said the words that would change everything. "Ms. Bondi, I want to ask you about your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Bondi's face went pale, her composed expression flickering for just a moment before her media training kicked in. In the gallery, Patel felt his blood turn to ice as he realized they had never prepared for this line of questioning. "Senator," Bondi began, her voice slightly strained, "I'm not sure what you're referring to. I had no relationship with Mr. Epstein." It was the wrong answer. Durbin had been building to this moment for weeks, following a paper trail that connected Bondi to Epstein's network in ways that even she might not have fully understood. And now, she had just lied under oath. "Really?" Durbin asked, his voice carrying that particular tone of prosecutorial skepticism that had made him famous during Supreme Court confirmation hearings. "You had no relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?" "That's correct," Bondi repeated, her confidence already beginning to crumble as she realized this wasn't a fishing expedition. Durbin knew something specific. Durbin reached for a manila folder that had been sitting untouched on his desk throughout the hearing. The gesture was theatrical, deliberate, designed to build maximum tension. Every camera in the room zoomed in as he opened the folder with the careful precision of someone handling evidence in a murder trial. "Then perhaps you can explain this," Durbin said, holding up what appeared to be a photograph. "This is a picture from a charity gala in Palm Beach, dated March 15, 2008. That's you in the red dress, standing next to Jeffrey Epstein. You're both smiling. You appear to be having quite the friendly conversation." The photograph hit like a physical blow. Bondi's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. In the gallery, reporters were frantically typing, already crafting the headlines that would dominate the news cycle for weeks. "Senator," Bondi finally managed, "I attend many charity events. I don't recall every person I might have been photographed with." It was a weak deflection, and everyone in the room knew it. But Durbin wasn't finished. He was just getting started. "Interesting," Durbin continued, pulling out another document. "Because according to these records from the Trump transition team in 2016, you specifically recommended that Jeffrey Epstein be considered for an ambassadorship to the United Kingdom. Your memo, dated December 3, 2016, describes Mr. Epstein as a successful businessman with extensive international connections who could serve American interest abroad." The revelation was devastating. Not only had Bondi known Epstein, she had actively tried to get him a position in the Trump administration. a position that would have given a convicted sex offender diplomatic immunity and access to foreign intelligence. Bondi's face had gone from pale to ashen. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "Senator, that recommendation was based on incomplete information. I was not aware at that time of Mr. Epstein's legal issues. The lie was transparent and pathetic. Epstein's 2008 conviction was public record, widely reported in the media. Any competent attorney, let alone someone being considered for Attorney General, would have known about it." "Not aware?" Durbin's voice rose in disbelief. "Ms. Bondi, Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of soliciting prostitution from a minor in 2008, the same year this photograph was taken. Are you telling this committee that you recommended someone for an ambassadorship without conducting even a basic background check?" That's when Cash Patel made his fatal mistake. From his seat in the gallery, the FBI director stood up and approached the witness table, clearly intending to whisper something to Bondi or her legal counsel. It was an unprecedented breach of Senate protocol, and it immediately caught Durbin's attention. "Director Patel," Durbin said sharply, his voice carrying the full authority of the committee chair, "please return to your seat. This is Ms. Bondi's hearing, not yours." But Patel was already committed to his course of action. In his desperation to save Bondi, he had convinced himself that he could somehow intervene without making things worse. He was spectacularly wrong. "Senator Durbin," Patel said, his voice carrying across the hushed chamber, "I believe there may be some confusion about the timeline of events. The FBI has information that could clarify—" "Director Patel," Durbin interrupted, his voice now icy with anger. "Are you attempting to coach a witness during a Senate confirmation hearing?" The implications of Patel's intervention were immediate and catastrophic. By trying to help Bondi, he had created the appearance that the FBI director was coordinating with a nominee to mislead the Senate. It was exactly the kind of impropriety that could destroy both their careers. "Senator," Patel stammered, realizing his mistake, "I was simply trying to ensure that the committee had accurate information." "Sit down," Durbin commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of senatorial authority. "Now." Patel reluctantly returned to his seat, but the damage was done. Every camera in the room had captured his unprecedented intervention. Every reporter was already calculating the political fallout. And Durbin now had two targets instead of one. "Ms. Bondi," Durbin continued, his momentum building, "let's return to your recommendation of Jeffrey Epstein. Were you aware that at the time you wrote that memo, Mr. Epstein was already under federal investigation for his connections to underage trafficking?" Bondi looked desperately toward where Patel was sitting, but the FBI director could no longer help her without making things even worse. She was on her own, facing questions she had never prepared for about connections she had hoped would never be discovered. I cannot recall the specific details of that recommendation," she said weakly. "You cannot recall recommending a convicted sex offender for an ambassadorship?" Durbin's incredulity was palpable. "Ms. Bondi, this is your signature on the memo. These are your words describing Mr. Epstein as someone who could serve American interests abroad. How do you explain this?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Bondi knew that any answer would be inadequate, that she had been caught in a web of associations that she couldn't explain away. But what came next would be even worse. "Furthermore," Durbin continued, reaching for yet another document, "I have here phone records showing multiple calls between your office and Mr. Epstein's private line in the weeks leading up to your transition memo. The last call was placed just 2 hours before you submitted your recommendation to the Trump team. The phone records were the smoking gun that destroyed any remaining credibility." Bondi hadn't just casually met Epstein at a charity event. She had been in active communication with him while recommending him for a federal position. "Senator," Bondi tried one last desperate deflection, "my office receives many calls. I cannot be expected to remember every conversation." "Ms. Bondi," Durbin interrupted, his voice now carrying the finality of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. "These weren't calls to your office. These were calls to your personal cell phone, calls that lasted an average of 17 minutes. Are you telling this committee that you had multiple lengthy personal conversations with Jeffrey Epstein, but somehow forgot to mention this when you recommended him for an ambassadorship? It was over. Bondi's confirmation was dead, her reputation destroyed, her career in public service finished. She sat at the witness table like a deer caught in headlights, unable to formulate any response that wouldn't make her situation worse. But Durbin still had one more revelation that would complete her destruction. "And finally, Ms. Bondi," he said, his voice now quiet, but carrying across the silent chamber. "I want to ask you about the $50,000 donation that Jeffrey Epstein made to your re-election campaign as Florida Attorney General in 2014. A donation made just 3 weeks after your office announced it would not be joining the multi-state investigation into his activities." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Bondi hadn't just known Epstein. She had taken his money and then used her official position to protect him from investigation. The corruption was complete and undeniable. Bondi's legal counsel finally intervened, whispering urgently in her ear. After a hushed conference, he leaned toward the microphone. "Senator Durbin, my client would like to exercise her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination." The words echoed through the chamber like a funeral bell. A nominee for Attorney General, the nation's top law enforcement official, was pleading the Fifth rather than answer questions about her relationship with a convicted sex trafficker. The hearing room erupted. Reporters rushed for the exits to file their stories. Committee members huddled in emergency consultations. And somewhere in the chaos, both Bondi's nomination and Kash Patel's career as FBI director died a very public death. Within hours, Bondi Epstein was trending worldwide. Within a day, she had withdrawn her nomination. Within a week, congressional leaders were calling for Patel's resignation for his unprecedented intervention. The 94 seconds of questioning that had destroyed Bondi's confirmation had also revealed the lengths to which the FBI director would go to protect Trump's nominees. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Bondi retreated to private practice, her dreams of becoming Attorney General shattered by her inability to explain away her connections to Jeffrey Epstein. Patel faced multiple congressional investigations into his conduct, his intervention during the hearing becoming evidence of his willingness to politicize the FBI, and Dick Durbin. He became the senator who had exposed the depth of corruption in Trump's Justice Department picks, proving that sometimes the most devastating political destruction comes not from dramatic speeches, but from simple, methodical questioning that reveals truths some people would rather keep buried. The lesson was clear. In confirmation hearings, as in life, the cover-up is often worse than the crime. And when you try to defend the indefensible, you end up destroying yourself in the process. Years later, Durbin's systematic destruction of Bondi would be studied in law schools as a masterclass in witness examination. But in the moment, it was simply an experienced senator asking the right questions at the right time and watching two careers collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. Sometimes justice is 94 seconds of uncomfortable questions. And sometimes that's all it takes to change everything.